Alrighty, welcome to Beaver Tail Books, and happy November! Finally got to November. We have an entire month full of events, and beginning Sunday, we've got Vessels of Love with Joyce Rupp. We've got R.E. Bellsmith here on November 4th. We've got Carol Rose Spalding on November 19th, and that's just a smidgen of all the events we've got. So grab an event calendar like this up at the front desk, or visit our website, or sign up for our newsletter. I just sent it out today, and it took me forever to write. So anyway, we cannot wait to see you at more upcoming events. Shapeshifter is an interactive memoir blending personal story with original art and creative exercises. The book examines the generational impact of inherited grief, following the tragic childhood loss of Amy's Aunt Susan. Through flash essays and evocative images, Amy reflects on how this loss shaped her life as an artist, mother, and death care worker. Rooted in the art of remembrance, Shapeshifter offers a raw look at addiction, rebellion, recovery, and forgiveness. Each chapter ends with prompts to help readers use creativity to process their own experiences of loss. Amy Putney Koenig, a celebrated Des Moines artist, has painted vibrant murals throughout our city, including on Ingersoll Avenue, Highland Park, and at various schools and businesses. Recently retired from a 30-year career designing custom folk art for Sticks Object Art and Furniture, Amy now works from her Drake neighborhood studio, creating paintings, collages, and illustrations. Her solo exhibits explore themes of grief, death, and recovery, inspiring her upcoming book of art prompts. Amy is also a hospice volunteer, an end-of-life assistant, and she enjoys roller skating. So join me in welcoming Amy.
Yay, thanks so much. Yay! Those little bios are so interesting. I had help with that because it's very like, what am I saying? Who am I talking to?
Can y'all hear her okay?
So my friend Brianne, who was pivotal, amazing, like important to this work for me, helped with the synopsis, and because I tend to like make it too much. But thank you, Jan. Thank you, Beaverdale Books. Thank you, everyone, for stopping in to discuss this little project. I'm so happy to see you, and so happy to be, not done with this project, but it's an interesting thing as an artist, and to have like stacks of lists of things I want to say, and little writings, and images, and pictures, and kind of a timeline of art exhibits that I put together, come together in this book. And sometimes when all that is done and it feels like it's new to those that we're sharing with, it can feel like that's all I've been talking about the past several years. So it can be like paralyzing to then share about it. And so I'm really excited and happy to be able to do that, to kind of get over myself. And a lot of times I say I'm using Megan Thee Stallion's confidence to just like show up and like keep going, because the work is done, but now we get to talk about it and have a conversation. So this little book, it's a little book. Hi. It's called Shapeshifter, as you know, the art of family tragedy and how to be amazing anyway. And tonight I brought, just for myself, a little, a timeline to kind of talk about how it works out, how it happened. So I've been an artist. I feel like I've been an artist all my life. And the funny thing is like I draw these little suns and moons. Come on in.
I'm good.
Tea and cookies.
I don't want to be committed.
Okay, I'm the same way. I'm barely here
that whole
myself.
commitment thing
I
bothers
might
me.
just be out the door. So this is a story that I grew up with, the story of this tragedy of my mom's little sister that was killed in a car crash. And when you're a kid, you kind of think of these stories. I was told this story, and I knew it was sad, but in my child mind, it didn't really sink in because I didn't know her. But as I got older, I saw how it affected my mother so much, like, sleeping all day. And I think there was really a time, in 1968, early 70s, where if you were a woman and you weren't happy, but you had all the things they wanted you to have, it's like, why aren't you happy? Like, get over it. Like, here's some electric shock treatment. Like, are you happy now? Or here is Thorazine or lithium, or, then let's start on opiate drugs, like. So I think that we didn't really talk about grief. And I think it was an accident that was such a way that it was so, the thing that really I did my family in was the fact that the child could have survived had anybody done the right thing that day. Oh. So it was one of those things that they wanted someone to blame. They wanted someone to take accountability. They wanted somebody to just step up to acknowledge that they did the wrong thing that day. And so with that, like, I was born a little over a year after that accident, and I feel like, after I kind of grow into myself, it's like, oh, you're just kind of handed this resentment. You're like, here's the gift of resentment for the things that happened to this child, and here's a side of addiction, because that's how we feel better about this. And I started making art about it many years ago, because I would find like papers and books and stories about Susan, and she just became like this ghost in my life. And in 2012, like, I purposefully had a big solo show about the whole thing in order to, I wanted my mom to be able to come to the show. And so it was called, what the title of the book was called The Art of Family Tragedy and How to Be Amazing Anyway. So it took two ideas of the collage work that was layers of antique papers and photographs and all the ways my grandmother wanted to write this story. Like, I have several versions of her intro of trying to tell the story, but I think she could not break through her anger and her sorrow to ever write the story. So I love her introduction. She was always a real victim in the story that she would tell, which I understand. But it kind of made it so her life that happened afterwards, like, my sister and I were like, you're nothing compared to the child that died, right? When a child dies, sometimes the other children are left feeling like they're not as precious as that child that died. Like, she knew sign language, she could sing, she was all these things, and we're just these grubby little weirdos. And but witnessing a parent in so much pain and sorrow, I got to a point of, I kind of wanted her to get past it as well. Like, can we move on? Can you get in your life? And she never really wanted to talk about recovery. But so I have a show in 2012. And half of it, like I say, was the collage on inheriting the trauma. And the other half was paintings, like bright, colorful paintings. And they're in the book about what I learned about myself, because I wanted to change the narrative when I discovered I was pregnant with my daughter. Like, I loved the darkness. I loved the resentment. I thought that stuff made me who I am. Like, I loved coming from that space. But it also led me to not trusting. I didn't think love was real. I was a little bit confrontational, or, just shut down, because it was just this way of being that was the example that I had. And so I knew when I had a daughter on the way, I had been in a tumultuous relationship that kind of lined up with the way I felt about myself, and I knew I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to be a different example for her. So I started really trying to unravel that, and like looking at what I could do to be different, to feel different, to be an example of a woman that loves herself, an example of a woman that is like gonna show up and be strong and be amazing, and not just say those things and then act in a different way, Hi. And so that show was really well received, not because it was this story. It is because it's the story that's intriguing and interesting, and I had like audio recording of Susan singing the year before her death at the fairgrounds. That was incredible to hear her voice, like, blew my mind. And people would come, and the thing that I think is important about this work is how we learn to share our own stories. Like, we all have these tragedies in our lives, in our history, in our stories. And so to hear others say, oh, my aunt or my uncle or my parents had these things, because we don't know when we're living by someone else's grief in a way. And it meant a lot to me to be able to share about that work, and then also share what I learned in recovery, like in being how to be amazing anyway. Like, how do I show up for the world? How do I let go of what was given to me and do something different with it? It's not about, my life happening to me. It's about how am I showing up for the world and participating in my life. And so all these little knick-knack sayings along the way became the paintings that were the How to Be Amazing Anyway. And so that show was really great. It kind of started this conversation. And then we moved in 2018 when my mom died. We had a really wild moment when she died. And she did get to go to that show in 2012. Hi. Come on in. There's tea and cookies. So in 2018, my mom died. I had been her caretaker the last few years, and we had talked a lot about grief and death and Susan, but she just didn't want to hang on to that story. She loved that, to hang on to that. But, we had a wild moment when she passed away, and she, blew my heart open. I had been working for a while to kind of, with a meditation teacher, to get to heart center. I feel so armored up. I feel so stuck, and, how am I getting there? And, I have this incredible family. My daughter was born, it changed everything for me. That was my How to Be Amazing Anyway. How to show up for others, how to be a different example. But when my mom died, it was this interesting thing where she showed herself to me without all this stuff, without her resentment and addiction and depression. It was this moment of pure love. And so from that moment, I did a second show that was called A Viewing Art on Death and Reconciliation, because it meant something to me to continue to show. I thought I was going to have this finale of an art show and let people come to my garage. It was really cool. It was during Art Week, and I invited community to come in and bring their own stories. You could either bring pictures and letters or writings to contribute to a community collage, or you could bring something to put in the fire, because we carry some stuff like that, So, and again, less about me, but me sharing the story invites others to share their story. But community showed up, it was a big deal. Community showed up, and they put things in the fire. We talked about loss. We talked about grief. We talked about death. We talked about sorrow. And like I say, they put things in the fire, or they contributed to a collage. And it was just, this was supposed to be a one-night show, and it ended up being a week and a half. My beloved dog died in the meantime. That was ridiculous. He was at the opening, and then I'm oh, performance art. He was amazing. It was lovely, but here's this thing. And so I had been beginning to think about the book, because so many people would respond and talk about it and wanted to share, and it felt worthy of creating a book somehow, some way. And so I was excited to get it together, but writing's really hard. I write like a sixth grader. I can talk, but then but then I was afraid, and I'm not sure. Writing it's an incredible art form, and it's I can see now where all my little notes and scribbles and papers and writings have been able to come together into one big project with a lot of editing and a lot of shedding and a lot of letting go of what that is. But in the meantime, I took up being a hospice volunteer. The year after my mom died, I had been taking care of her, and I love to help women in recovery. I've had the opportunity to go to Mitchellville Prison on a monthly basis for a couple years and attend recovery meetings and be a part of that, and I loved it. But I could see where it felt like the death world was a place we weren't really comfortable. And so, and hospice, and a lot of times we see hospice and we think it's instant death. And it felt because a lot of my early work was using, I liked that kind of scary part of cutting wings and feathers and heads off of animals, and using found objects, and I collect bones, and how is something so repulsive in death that is so beautiful in life? I love bones, I love the elements, I love a little treasure, and my daughters taught me to just leave it. Just leave it. If you love it so much, just leave it. And so, and in the book, I talk about digging up the family dog, because my mom wanted to die so often, and in her grief and in her sorrow, you know, she would say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here anymore. Nice knowing you. I'm going to die. And it kind of twisted this thing in me to be interested in death. After the stressful times of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose her. It was like, if that's what you want to do, okay, but can I dig up the family dog? And I still have our Doberman skull, you know, and I was in high school at the time. And it just kind of led to this working with some of that stuff that we would look away from, you know, looking at death from a young age, because she had a lot of friends that died too. And I think sometimes that happens when we use drugs, you know. And it was a chaotic time. There was a lot of sadness and sorrow. She had a lot of friends in Vietnam. And so there was difficulty there. But, you know, fast forward, I think I want to be this hospice volunteer. And I did the training, and it was amazing. Like, you can choose what kind of volunteer you want to be. If you want to make cookies, if you want to do laundry, if you want to clean, if you want to sit with people. Because I think it's really important to be an advocate for the person doing the dying. Because you know how mad people are at you when you're dying, and you don't have a choice? You know, and they're sad at you, and they're mad at you, and they don't want you to go. And so to be a person that is this neutral, if not supportive, like, you know, I've said to a 100-year-old woman who hadn't spoke to anyone for weeks, like, I know this sucks. And she looked at me like she acknowledged me, because I know no one had been able to tell her that. Like, I know this sucks for you right now. Like, she wanted to be busy. She wanted to be working. She wanted to be in her life. She did not want to be in a home, in a chair, being condescendingly spoken to. But it's an accidental thing that happens. So I see that there's a need in that world to be sort of this presence. And it's the main thing is it's not because I do anything special, but it's because I remind others, and I remind you that you know how to do this. We know how to take care of our people that are dying. We're kind of told that we don't know how. We think we don't know how. And I try to equate it to birth. Like, you know, someone's having a baby. I'm having a baby. You're having a baby. I've never done this before. That's okay. You still know how to do it. Your body knows how to do it. We know in our soul and our core and our whole selves how to care for dying, just as we know how to care for babies in a way. And so I like to remind people that we know how to be there, and we can show up for others that way. And then I did a training through Going with Grace. And because someone had told me, there used to be trainings that would come through Iowa City. You could do a death doula training in Iowa City a couple times a year, and it was like $500 for the weekend. And I was actually leading a yoga and meditation class for Every Step Hospice. Like, they have this great employee appreciation day, and I was there, and then I met the director of Every Step Hospice, and I was like, hey, I want to be a hospice person, and I'm going to do that training in Iowa City. And she was like, I'm going to tell you, just one thing I'm going to tell you is, like, you should just be a volunteer. Like, don't even mess with that. Just volunteer. And that was the smartest thing ever, because what a great education in doing the thing. So now there's a lot of online courses. There's a lot of ways you can get a certification that isn't even a real certification to be a death doula. Like, it's not a real, it's a non-medical assistant. But because trainings, you know, create money and people pay for them, that's great. Like, you can still learn a lot, but I always recommend volunteering. Volunteering, because it puts you in the space with the people in all kinds of ways and realms and sounds and smells and all the ways that it happens. And so I'm doing my training. I'm in the work. I love the work. In 2022, I thought, I'm going to have this show called From the Altar. You know, all art on, or this one was art on the beauty and death and the magic of life. And I invited artists to come to my studio and pick out something from my death altar, which is just a table full of, you know, I have funeral receipts from the 1880s, or I have, you know, bones and artwork and teeth and little skulls and little, you know, all kinds of things that have to do with death. And the community showed up so amazingly for that show. It was incredible. The book wasn't done yet. So I only had 3 pieces in it. No book was done. Oh, that's really, like, I don't have the thing for the show. I'm having the show, but I don't have the thing for the show that I was going to do. But this is an incredible show. The show doesn't need me to have my thing. But again, it brings me to community, because the guest book, the writing after that show that people left, you know, from medical workers to young parents to older people to people taking care of their parents, like, thank you for surrounding me in this conversation about death. and letting it be beautiful, letting it be scary, letting it be unknown, but letting it be something we're all doing. Like, we're all going to get there. It's the plan. And never to like discount it or make it less painful or sorrowful, but I think if we talk about it, I think if we let grief be a version of love, because I feel like grief for a while kind of felt like this shameful thing, like a weakness, but it's really a beautiful thing. And so in 2023, I applied for an art project grant from the Iowa Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts, and I was working with this incredible writer named Brianne Sanchez, who was encouraging me and talking to me, and someone I've known for years, and is a great advocate of arts and writing, and a really great collaborator and a support of artists. Like, if you have any kind of project, I suggest like talking with her about that. And we got the grant, and so I get to take all those notes and all those stories and all the little snippets and all, like, you know, it can go so many ways, and it meant a lot to me. This book, you know, I didn't want it to be, I was like, is this a trauma dump? Like, I don't want that. This isn't that. Like, but there's moments, like when you're working through hard stuff, like sometimes when you're working on something like this, you have to grow. And you have to go through some hard stuff to get to the other side of what you're working on. And so I was reminded that it's a love letter. Like, it's really a love letter, because this is all about forgiveness. It's all about forgiving everyone involved in the death of that child. Like, I reached out to everyone involved during the process of these art shows to let them know they were forgiven. The driver of the vehicle had passed away, but I contacted her daughter. She is one of a set of twins, and I was so excited to contact her, and I was like, oh, she's a therapist in Kansas City. This is so cool. I can't wait to talk to her. This will be so interesting. And she was like, don't ever talk to me again. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't ever talk to me again. And I was like, immediately like, wait, oh no, forgiveness. Yeah, like, she's maybe not ready for that. Like, because I knew it was really difficult for them, for the family of the driver of the car, who had their own child the same age as Susan's, as it was for my family. And so to let everyone know that they were forgiven, because I want to clear the path for my children and for my family, and not hand them this resentment, you know, because it can live in us. I believe that, like, that it can stick with us and be sticky, and it meant a lot to me to forgive everyone involved, and to you know, laugh at my mom being the way she was. Like, she dealt with her addiction, with her trying to not be in pain, for her dealing with grief the way she dealt with it. And so here we are. Like, it's a book that contains, you know, I have these are sympathy cards. Like, it took me years to realize what I had, like the treasure trove of, like, the story, the sympathy cards, the introduction that my grandmother tried to write. You know, I've always seen the album of Susan in the coffin. I love this picture so much. Like, she was 10 years younger than my mom. But so here's this little baby here, and the family that loved her, and then it just blew them all out. Like, that grief, that sorrow, and you know, it can do that. And then this was like a first collage that I had done for a show where she was in the Des Moines Playhouse. She went to St. Joseph Academy. She was like she went to Monroe Elementary School. She had friends in the community, and then it just kind of got going. Then I started realizing where I fit into all that. And so it meant something to me to include art and activity, because not everybody is an artist or being actively, like, being creative, but it is such a great tool that we can give to ourselves, because it can be a heavy chapter, and then you can go make something, you know, and you can see how you unfold yourself, like where we're hiding our own grief, or where we just need to soften or let go or be angry. Like, so each chapter has an activity. This was our group collage from that show. That is really cool and layered. I regretted putting Susan in there, because I'm like, aren't we done with her yet? But she was the catalyst of the thing, so she belonged there. So there's notes and photos and little pages on death and things that I had worked with, and there were all these. I found many photos of Susan on the back of each one, like written was killed in a car crash, killed in a car crash, died in a car crash, died on a Girl Scout outing. So you could see like this neurotic thing, and then this thing that happens of staying stuck in that, like rather than moving through and letting it go, like not being able to see life unfold in before you. And so it's kind of all in here. I can talk and talk, but I'd love to know if you have questions. If you want to know anything, you can shut it down. Yes.
No, amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
So it's all kind of in here. There's pictures in the coffin, you know, and I guess I should include a trigger warning that when my mom died, I got to put her ashes in the vault with Susan. Like finally my mom got to go where she wanted to be. And Susan is in a place, so she's about this high in a drawer and in a coffin, and it's a little metal coffin. And I was like, this is my previous work. You know, can I show you my previous work, and can I open the coffin? Can I see her? And they said, yeah. And because I thought, I have to ask. Wouldn't I regret not asking? Like, if this child, this thing that's never been real in my life, that has taken up so much space and brought so much sorrow, who didn't want to bring that much sorrow? This child didn't want to be remembered for her death. And so that was part of my undoing as well, to remember her for her great spirit and light and presence rather than the tragedy of how she left. And they let me take pictures of her. They said, you can do that. No one has ever wanted to be here when we exhume a body. Like, no family member ever wants to see this. And I thought that was so sad and so interesting. Like, it's not like it's the person, but it's the shell of the person. So the thing that was super cute was that she, you know, it's 1968, and she had a little troll doll with her. And so that little troll is still with her, and I got a great picture of him for being her guardian. And so that's in there too, just so you know. When you're like, what the heck is that? That's what that is. Yeah. Any questions?
Well, right off the bat, hi, so good to be here. When you write, do you like to handwrite or type?
I start with handwriting, and it is, so I have all, like I'm mentioning, like all those little scribbles and notes and like sketchbooks and things and ways I was going to make it happen. And typing was really hard for me at first. And it felt like, because for me, I'm a little bit of a mover and a shaker. Like, I'm used to working fast and painting big murals and drawing furniture, and then I sit in a computer and I'm like cross-eyed and falling apart. Or it's intimidating. And so it just was it's like a year-long process of getting better at that. But I have to, it's like if I do work on the iPad, like digital work, I have to start with a sketch because I don't get it right. Like, it's not right from the start. Like, I have to do it on paper first. So it's a lot of notes. And Brianne was really great. She worked with me, and we did a lot of interviews because I felt like I could talk about it, but I couldn't write about it. But it's also this wild identity thing that happens where I wanted to be, like I said, like tough and cool and like be me, but I also had to be vulnerable. Like, you have to be vulnerable in that as well. Like, I had a really wild moment with Brianne where I was like, you know, this happened, but I don't want my mom to look bad. And she was like, people are going to form their own opinion of that. And I was just like, it sounds really weird to say it, but it's like I never let myself be mad at my mom for anything. I mean, I would be mad at her for sure, but it was never like a you got me thing, you know? So that was this big kind of breakthrough in the process. So I had to do it all, handwriting and typing, and it took practice. I did the Grammarly thing for a while, and I was like, if that thing doesn't shut up and quit telling me how to write, I'm kind of comma happy, but this thing is really comma happy. And like I was saying, like, I write artistically. Like, I look at the page, right, in this way, and I'm like, oh, a couple little dots and a space there, and let me put that, and it's like, oh, there's rules to all those things. And like, I didn't know that. It's not a visual thing, but so it's interesting to be visual that way, and then the art of words, you know, like I did a lot of reading and listening. Like, Melissa Febos has a really great book called Body Work. I think that's what it's called, about writing your story, and it's that was really helpful, and listening to other books, because I hadn't been, like, I'd been so zoned in my own world that I hadn't been doing that much reading about similar subjects. And so then once I was reading and listening, it's like, oh, what an art form is that? Because I'm clunky. And so 10 short little chapters, not a page number to be found. That's the thing. I wanted it to be a little, there's no order that it has to go in, right?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, from the very beginning until now, how much time went by? How many years from the beginning?
2012 was the original Art of Family Tragedy and How to Be Amazing Anyway.
Okay.
And so it's funny to say, oh yeah, I did all this. Like I make the joke about like I'm doing this for my family and letting it go and being done with it. And they're like, boy, you're still talking about it, aren't you?
Okay.
Yeah, right? That was the show. So there was Space.
Yeah,
2012 was
yeah.
the original show that my mom got to go to and be a part of and see and hear Susan singing. And there was a wall of her dress and the hospital receipt and her photos, like really be immersed in this installation work. And then 2018, my mom died. 2019, I did the second show that was supposed to be the finale. And then it just felt, then I'm doing some work with people that are dying in hospice care. And it felt like the thing we need to talk about. Like it felt like it involves death. It involves recovery. Like my recovery from alcoholism is a huge part of that, of coming out of that darkness of, I don't want that. I don't want that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How old were you when she passed away?
I wasn't even born yet. So I was born in 1969 and she died in 1968.
So you obviously never met her.
Never met her.
But you lived under a shadow.
Yeah. For sure. Like that gives me goosebumps thinking about it because she was always there. Like we thought we saw her ghost and she just was ever present. And I feel like there was this insensitivity to me as a child because when you hear about someone dying and you're watching cartoons and you just think, boop, gone. Like, and then when I heard that she was coming home from the ledges and she was stuck on the car and drugged through a ditch and then they had her get up and walk and get a ride home from a stranger and then get taken to the hospital and then they say she's fine and then I started to get my own anger and my own like frustration and I could see why everyone was so mad about it and take it on from there, but I never met her. I have a picture of her and my sister. I have an amazing older sister that I get to see pictures of them together, but I never met her.
How old was your sister?
My sister was like 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep. And my mom was, so she was 10 years older. Susan was born in 57 and my mom was born in 47. So my mom was like 20, 22 and married and had my sister when Susan was killed. And then it just changed the course of the whole family, right? Like it changed the course of the whole family. Like I don't know people. We didn't really, like as we grew up, like my parents got divorced and then it just dissolves into like nobody can get along. Nobody, like we all know that this one's always going for drugs. This one's always doing her thing. Like just this scattered, broken because of grief, because we didn't talk about grief, because we didn't kind of get there. And they were so fighting. They fought to the 70s for someone to take accountability. There was billboards and there were signs. My grandmother would talk a lot about no-fault car insurance, because there was something about insurance at the time. Like if you were a passenger in the car and you were killed, sorry. But she was a child and she was with a Girl Scout leader and who was also a nurse. And so you think that your child's in good hands and it just wrecked them.
So she didn't die like at the
No.
accident.
No. She had to have a car, like they had to use a tire jack. They get a car off of her and then they had her get up and walk when they should have, somebody should have got an ambulance and like not had her move. And then, but they put her in the back of a station wagon so the driver of the car could rush her own daughter to the hospital and then had Susan just get a ride home. That other girl just had stitches, right? If they would have taken Susan with her, they could have said it was a car crash, this has happened. But because Susan gets home with a stranger and then gets to the hospital, he can't say what happened. So they accuse him of being what happened, her dad. And so it was just this. And my aunt was there and my grandmother were there who were nurses as well. And they could see the bump on her head. They could see what was going on. And they just, even the pediatrician was called by this nurse and told that he didn't need to come in because she was just vomiting because they'd been at a picnic. And so all these players are on my grandmother's shit list. Okay, I'm gonna say it just like that. So this is when like all this is involved. Like this particular doctor, the whole hospital, Myron Blank. I've seen letters like she wrote and wrote and wrote and never found forgiveness. So I wanted that to be my job and to let go and let Susan be a brilliant little child that they got for a short amount of time.
And Susan was born in what year?
57.
Susan was born in 57.
Yeah.
Wow. But that adds a lot of layers to just thinking about this whole concept
Right.
that a child's killed in a car accident.
Right.
But there's so much.
There's so much. That's why I was like, oh, don't you just car crash, you disappear, and then it was like, oh no, there was layer after layer.
Yes.
So were you worried that when your mom saw your show that it would bring up a lot, or maybe be able to close the door for her, or?
I really wanted it to close the door for her. I was so excited, and to have her there and to have her voice. I was worried a little bit about like it being something, but in the end, it was almost like she's so into her thing that she just kind of came in and was like cool, and then like that's great, and then get me back home to my bed, to my sink, to my stuff. She wasn't going to break down from her story at all. You know, like I was looking for something to change her, but it was really beautiful to have other people in the community, like a couple family members that I'd never met had come that remembered Susan, and my dad was there, but he can't talk about grief or death or anything sad too much, you know. It's just he's scared of it. He's really scared of it, and some people are, and that's okay. But it was interesting. So there's a woman named Terry from the Chrysalis Foundation. I think that's her thing. She knew Susan. I thought more people I would know Susan, or that I would meet people that were her age. And she just said, I went to elementary school, and I remember that accident because it was in May. It was in April or May, and we were told that Susan was in an accident. She was going to be okay, but then when we got back to school for the summer, we knew she had been killed. But my mom got to be there and see all the work I put into it, and it's like siblings that have their own story. You can grow. She saw what she wanted to see of it, but it wasn't anything like changing for her. And like my sister and I grew up in the same house together, but we can have entirely different experiences. We have kind of different experiences of our mom, which I think is interesting. Hi.
Any other questions?
We good? Ready to dance party?
All right. And we have books up here, and I think Amy will sign
Sure.
copies. Thanks so much for coming. Let's hear it for Amy.
Yeah.